All right, Friday morning, Chase Senior's in the house. The draft is approaching. Lots of hot rumors connected to the 49ers. We hit it all right now. Come aboard. All right, we're off and running. Krug Show on a Friday morning. Chase Senior's in the house. We're going to talk some Niners. Fired up. Hope everybody's having a great day. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out, and they do run out, so get there early. Get some Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Tell them that Krug sent you, and, of course, we're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, along the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. And we can't forget our good friends at Claudaddy Arcades. And like that, there it is right there over Chase's head. Thanks to Claudaddy Arcades for sponsoring. They've got 3 locations down in Southern Cal, but they've got spots in Fresno and Modesto. They got a brand new arcade coming here in the Bay Area. So follow them on Instagram at claw_daddy_arcades and find a location near you. And thanks to Claudaddy Arcades for being a proud sponsor of the Krug Show. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, Chase, good to see you, man.
You as well.
Yeah. What's the, what's Chat Sports plan for the draft? I know you guys, have some amazing in-game stuff in season. What's your approach on the draft? Do you guys slam beers on the draft? Do you go pick by pick? I know you covered the Niners and the Eagles, so how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so anytime I'm on air, I just want to be as entertaining, insightful, informative, thought-provoking as possible, and I always want to engage with the audience. And so we do that during our watch parties on the 49ers Report. The real ones know, and people who subscribe to the channel are very familiar with what we do. And for an event like the NFL Draft, it's going to be very similar to what we do during NFL free agency and during the season for our watch parties. We'll be live every single day, every single round, talking about every single pick. And so for the Niners, we'll do deep dive breakdowns on every prospect that the Niners draft. And then after each round, we'll do draft grades to kind of go through all of the picks that day. And so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you can catch me live on the 49ers Report. On Thursday, probably going to go live 2 hours prior to the draft, and it's going to be interactive once again. I want people to have a voice on the show. So come hang out with us on the 49ers Report, and of course, tap into everything that Larry Kruger's doing as well.
It's so fun. I've never done what you do, the in-game watch party. But John Lund and I have been doing it on Fridays for Giants baseball. So we're doing one today for the Giants and the Angels where we sit there and, if Giants hit a home run, we slam a beer and that kind of thing. And I load up with 3 or 4 beers. There's something about watching sports and drinking beer and getting paid for it that is pretty freaking special.
And when you drank a beer, the Giants won on a walk-off, one of the first shows that you did, right?
That's right. Well, we're undefeated, too. That's the other thing. We're 3-0. Nice. So we go tonight.
Great start for the Giants, by the way.
Oh, I know. It's fun to watch, too, because I thought they were going to be a tire fire. All right, so we're sharing the screen because Puka Nacua pocket watched Brock Purdy the other day on television, and here's how it sounded. I guess we're not going to hear it unless we actually turn the audio up, which is kind of my job. Okay, there we go. Let's try it again. Take 2, one more time, this time with feeling.
Brock Purdy, is he going to get a 5?
I don't think so.
Do you think he's going to go with a 4? It's going to start with a 4.
Yeah.
A high 4?
No. I think
mid 4.
Mid 4.
A 45?
I think so. I think
if he does that, that'd be smart for him and them.
Yeah. I think he seems like a smart guy. I think they have a chance to still be in their window. And I think if he goes for a 5, the window closes.
Wow. Strong statement from Puka Nacua. And yet there are Niner fans that actually kind of feel that as well. So what do you make of that comment from Puka? First of all, it's just bad form. You never want to comment on another guy's contract, especially getting into the particulars and making evaluations on, are the Niners going to be a contender? So basically in Puka's mind, if the Niners pay Brock $45 million or less, the window's open. But if he makes 50 or more, the window's closed. What would be your reaction?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth, because there's that saying out there, you never mess around with another man's pockets. And so bold for Puka Nacua to say that. And he said some interesting things a couple of times this offseason. A few weeks ago, he had said, yeah, once I get to 30 years old, I kind of want to retire. And I was like, okay, that's head scratching, because he's looking for a contract extension soon as he enters into year 3. And so the Rams are just going to say, okay, we're going to give you this contract extension now, but then by the time that contract runs out, you're just going to call it quits on us. And then he says this about Brock Purdy, and I completely disagree. I think that if Purdy were to make nearly $60 million, then Puka Nacua could have a point. And I think the case in point is the Dallas Cowboys. You think about how the Cowboys have paid Dak Prescott now twice with massive contract extensions after they got him on a bargain coming out of Mississippi State. They have been way too Dak reliant over the last few years. And because they've paid him so much money, I think that the rest of the roster has been pretty vanilla, very watered down. And Dak is not a quarterback who you want dropping back 35 to 45 times. When he was on that rookie contract, when he took over for Tony Romo, when were the Cowboys at their best? When they had a great offensive line in front of them with a couple of future Hall of Famers, when they had Ezekiel Elliott, and when they had some good wide receivers, they had a good tight end, and they had a really good defense. But then the Cowboys, after Dak Prescott's rookie contract, gave him the first contract extension, and then last year paid him around $60 million. That team has been top heavy. And you've seen it where the Cowboys have had good seasons in the regular season where they've won a lot of games, but then in the playoffs, they don't have a lot of talent. They don't have a lot of depth, and they lean on Prescott too much where they've become a too pass-happy team. And so in that case, I think that it's impacted the Cowboys as far as their Super Bowl chances when Prescott's making a ton of money, especially now at $60 million. But if the 49ers can pay Purdy between 50 and 55, I think that's a win for Purdy. I think it's a win for the Niners. He still becomes a top 10 highest paid quarterback in the NFL, which he deserves because he's played at a top 10 level since he became the starter in 2022. But with the increasing salary cap, if you're at 50 to 55 down the road, if Purdy plays throughout the duration of that contract like he did in 2023 when he was top 5 in MVP voting, that contract could end up being a bargain. It still allows you to build out the rest of your roster. The Niners have an opportunity to do that in the next 2 drafts when they are loaded with great draft picks, including a lot of picks inside the first 4 rounds and inside the top 100. And I think that it's a win for Purdy when he gets that deal. It's a win for the Niners because they can also continue to build a quality football team around Purdy. And you look at a team like the Eagles, right? Couple of years ago, after they made it to Super Bowl 57, they paid Jalen Hurts more than $50 million per year. And they've still had a great roster with a lot of depth, high-level talent. A lot of players have been paid top dollar. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, some defensive players as well, and they just won a Super Bowl. And how did they win a Super Bowl? Playing complementary football. The Niners can pay Purdy between 50 to 55 and still play complementary football and still afford a lot of talent, especially if they draft well. And so I disagree with Puka in saying if he makes 50 plus, the Super Bowl window is closed. I agree with Puka if he changed that number to if Purdy was making 60, then I would have some reservations about that contract.
You know, I kind of feel that, very similarly. I mean, I do find it very interesting that, okay, so you're going to take your quarterback from 900,000 to, 50 or 60 times that. That in and of itself is the big move.
Yeah.
Whether he gets paid 45 or 50 or 55 or 60. I mean, it's like, yeah, I get it. The more he gets paid, the less money you have to spend everywhere else. But the big change, I mean, I would, if he came out and said, you know what, I don't think the Niners can win, paying Brock Purdy, the going rate. Instead, he's like differentiating between paying him a contract in the 45 million AAV as opposed to paying him a contract in the 50 million AAV. And I just think it's negligible difference. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking, it's not a huge significant difference. Now, I agree with you. Dallas put themselves in kind of a pickle with the Prescott, and I would like to pay Purdy less than 55 million and not get to 65 million. But the big change is going from 900 grand to 50 million at all, or even if it was 45 million. I mean, that's the big change. And there's no question. When you sign your quarterback to big money, a big money deal, you have to prioritize. I think one thing you may see this weekend with the draft coming up is you may see Dallas Goedert traded. You may see Bryce Huff traded. You may see Jordan Davis traded. The Eagles may move a couple of players that are making money for cap reasons,
And they
we'll
let
try to
players
replace
go who
those
made
guys.
a lot of money.
Excuse me?
They let a lot of players go who made more money elsewhere for that reason.
Yeah, and also they're going to try to find replacements, cheaper, more efficient replacements in the draft for some of the guys that they think, hey, they're paying them a lot, they like them, but they feel like they could replace them. I think Goddard could be moved. I mean, I'm hearing that at least, and I'm I've seen Jordan Davis's name. I think Bryce Huff's probably available. So I think that's kind of the way of the world in the NFL when you're paying your quarterback top money. But what's the alternative? Don't have a quarterback worthy of top money. Keep drafting rookies and hope that they win in their rookie campaign. I mean, these are problematic issues. The interesting thing to me is the latest Matt Mayoko interview on KMBR. And here was the quote from Mayoko. He says, the latest is that the 49ers have made an offer to Purdy. It's kind of sitting out there. He says, Brock Purdy in his camp, and I don't know how much Brock's involved. I'm sure the agent is shielding him from a lot of this stuff. But the offer the 49ers have made isn't one that Brock Purdy's side is inclined to take at this point. Okay, well, Matt could have gotten that just from the fact that the deal's not done, right?
Right.
So, I mean, just by definition, that they don't have a deal, so they don't have a deal. But then he goes on to say, nor will they, which kind of makes it sound like he's been on the horn with Kyle Strong and the agent for Purdy. And, like it's almost like maybe that info was shared. Like, hey, their offer is X and we're not taking it, nor will we. Otherwise, why would Mayoko throw nor will they on the end? When you hear that, the Niners have made an offer, Purdy's side is saying we don't like it, and they're not going to take it at this point, nor will they in the future. Isn't that kind of a diplomatic way of saying that the two sides are at an impasse?
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why the deal hasn't gotten done up to this point. And what's funny is that Puka Nacua says, yeah, I think Purdy's contract is going to be somewhere in the fours. The Niners' offer to Purdy is probably somewhere in the fours. I would guess around $45 million per year. And you look at some of the other quarterbacks who are kind of in that neighborhood of 40 to 45. Matt Stafford at 40 per season, Kirk Cousins at 45, Patrick Mahomes, interestingly enough, at 45 as well, Deshaun Watson at 46, Kyler Murray at 46, and then you jump up to Jalen Hurts at 51. And so I think the Niners offer right now is probably in that range of in the mid fours right now, and Puka Nacua might be right on that. Also, Mayoko mentioned how Jed York called Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback. Well, I found that to be interesting because my brain just got working and I was like, okay, Jed York is the one who writes off on the checks as the Niners owner. He didn't do himself any favors by calling Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback if he wants that contract to be under 50. Because if he thinks he's a top 10 quarterback, then Brock Purdy's agent and Brock Purdy can just say, the owner of the football team thinks I'm a top 10 guy. If you think I'm a top 10 guy, then the going rate for a top 10 quarterback is $50+ million. And that's the number at the base that we're going to start at. And look, these are how contract negotiations go. When you're an employee, your number is always higher at the start of contract negotiations. When you're the employer, your number is always a little bit lower. The employee usually comes down. The employer usually moves up. And so that's what has to happen in order for this contract to get done.
Yeah, I mean, you see it on these real estate shows. The house is going for $600,000. Well, if you offer them 600 grand, then great. They usually take it. If you offer them, if you say, I'm offering you 500 grand, and some people are ballsy like that, will make some ridiculous low ball offer, there's going to be a counter.
Yep.
And then, sometimes you turn your buyer off a little bit. So, sometimes they dig in their heels. But I mean, it's a negotiation. If you're offering 5, you're basically saying, hey, I want this house for 550. Let's meet in the middle. And maybe they say, hey, we don't want 550. We want, we asked for 6 so we could get at least 575. So we want 575. So, I mean, there's different ways to play this game. I'm going to share the screen. I don't know if this is a reliable Twitter play thing or not. You could probably tell me if it is. But 49er and NFL News 24/7 put this out. 49ers, Brock Purdy's camp wants $55 million plus per year. The 49ers want him closer to $50 million. They're not as far apart as people think in AAV. The issue is the length, the guaranteed money. SF is positioning a 3-year deal while Purdy's team is seeking a 5-year contract. Let the negotiations continue. What do you think of this? Well, I don't even know much about this this Twitter site, but what do you think of this report or this information? I mean, I do think I think that last part is probably true, that the Niners would like a 3-year deal and that Purdy's team would probably be liking a longer deal, a 5-year deal. I think that does make sense. But what do you think of this whole report?
Yeah, 49er Sports Talk has hit the nail on the head with some reports over time. Not sure if they're sourced enough to report on the specifics of the Brock Purdy contract, but in theory, it does make some sense. Just moments ago, I'm talking about how maybe the Niners offer is around 45 and Brock Purdy's camp wants 50 plus. Well, if Brock Purdy and his camp want 50 plus and the Niners are at 55, then that would also make sense too. And of course, in all of this, the guaranteed money is going to be very important, and the length of the contract is going to be very important. If you're Kyle Strongham and you're representing Brock Purdy, you want your client to get guaranteed money, average annual value, because that's the bragging rights going up against other quarterbacks. And the length of the contract is important because you want your client to be well represented and well compensated, and you want financial security for your client. But as people know, agents get a kickback too. Like in the television business, agents always get about 10% of that television personality's contract. And in the NFL world, it's probably a little bit more, right? And so for the guaranteed money in the years, if the Niners are at 3, I like that for San Francisco. I would love 3 for 50. That's good for the team. And people will take that as if I'm disrespecting Brock Purdy. I'm not. He's a top 10 quarterback. He's played elite football. But what's best for the team is what's important for you as a fan, because you want the team to still be able to build up the football team to be as good as they can roster-wise and competitive as they can as a football unit. And so, you look at the guaranteed money for some of these quarterbacks. Josh Allen's at $250 million. Dak Prescott's at 231. Deshaun Watson has a lower AAV at 46, but he got $230 million fully guaranteed. Joe Burrow's at 219. Trevor Lawrence is at 200. Justin Herbert is 193. Lamar Jackson's 185. Jalen Hurts is 179. Jared Goff is at 170. Tua is at 167. Jordan Love is at 160. And so the guaranteed money is definitely different on a lot of those deals compared to the average annual value, because Tua's lower on that list as far as guaranteed money, but he's higher as far as AAV. So is a player like Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love. And I think with some of those quarterbacks, Brock Purdy is better than the likes of Dak Prescott, in my opinion. He's better than Deshaun Watson. He's better than Trevor Lawrence. He's been better than Justin Herbert. He's been better than Jared Goff. He's been better than Tua, Jordan Love. Kyler Murray is in that list at 46 per year and 160 in total guaranteed money. And again, this circles back to it being a part of the contract negotiations, right? The back and forth. Purdy and his camp can say he's been better and is better and has had more playoff success than X, 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 and X. So that's important for AAV. That's important for guaranteed money. The Niners can also say, yeah, but how about Patrick Mahomes? He's at 141 guaranteed, 45 per year, and it allows Kansas City to be a Super Bowl contender year in and year out, to pay Chris Jones, to pay Nick Bolton, to pay some of our offensive linemen. And so you can see where both sides are kind of coming from in this strong arm back and forth battle between both parties.
Is the term, the years, about Brock, or is it about Kyle and John? Because, I mean, if you're hedging on Kyle and John at all, they've made it clear, hey, Brock Purdy's going to be our quarterback as long as we're here. And I don't know if that was told to them and they're repeating it, or if that's their feeling and that's their stance. But if the Niners are hedging on the regime, hedging on Purdy, they could just say, hey, all three of you guys got 3 years and we'll evaluate from then. I kind of feel like the Niners want to have a clean break and the flexibility to pivot off of Lynch and Shanahan and Purdy if things go south. If the next 2 years, the Niners win 5 games and 6 games and the whole thing just backslides and they don't hit in the draft and they're not a contender and they're not looking, they're further and further and further away. They probably 3 years from now, Jed and will probably go to somebody else, and he probably wants a clean slate, which would include a brand new quarterback and a brand new start. But that's, other people would say, yeah, man, that's really kind of hedging on the regime. And they would say they're not in favor of that. What's your thought on that? You think the 3 years is about Brock? You think the 3 years is about kind of a clean break if things continue to slide?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I haven't really thought about it in that way, but that's why the Krug Show has almost 57,000 subs, and that's why you're a Bay Area sports radio legend. It is a good point because, like, from Jed York's standpoint, again, he's the one who's writing off on these checks, right? So is he saying, hey, Brock, we're going to give you 3 years. Kyle and John, that puts you on notice. This whole regime has 3 years. Here is your time to shine. Let's see what you can do. Can you win a Super Bowl together? You keep saying that you can. You've gotten close, but here's the definitive timeline in which you have to make it work. And I think that would make some sense. Now, from the Niners standpoint, 3-year contract, that gives you a lot of team flexibility because if Purdy doesn't work out, you can get rid of that contract and you don't have to worry about that deal handicapping you for the long haul. It's easier to move off of it, whether you trade him, release him, or you just let Purdy play out the remainder of that contract. Those extra 2 years that you save, that's huge. I think about a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. They signed Carson Wentz to a huge contract extension. And then right after that, I think the next offseason, they drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. People thought that the Eagles were crazy. You pay Wentz all this money, then you drafted Jalen Hurts. Well, what ended up happening? Carson Wentz flailed out and failed out, and then the Eagles had their next replacement in Jalen Hurts. And with Jalen Hurts being on that rookie contract, it allowed them to still have a really good roster to pay players to the point where Jalen Hurts was on that rookie contract, and in 2022, they made it to the Super Bowl. That's what that 3 to 5 year difference could allow the Niners. If the Purdy, Shanahan, Lynch dynamic doesn't work out, you can quickly pivot to the next regime and still hopefully be in that Super Bowl window despite that contract not working out for the player or the organization.
It's a very interesting spot for the 49ers because they have a quarterback they really like. And yet, it sounds like the regime is kind of hedging on the entire regime and they may want to keep the deal short. I look at Philly and say, well, you know what? They had Hurts and they still drafted Tanner McKee. And guess what? Tanner McKee is good. Yeah. And so what, everybody sees things as they are. And right now people see Hurts is a star. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. But we get 3 weeks into this season and Hurts has an injury and Tanner McKee steps in and just starts throwing lasers all over the field. And the Eagles win 12 games and, go to the Super Bowl with Tanner McKee. suddenly people are going to be like, whoa, look at the Eagles. Now they've got a quarterback that they could trade for multiple number ones. So what do you think of the Niners, as far as quarterbacks in this draft? Because I mean, were you thinking that the Eagles would go for Tanner McKee, or was that a total surprise? And is there a day 3 quarterback? I've been watching the Gruden thing, and I'll tell you, man, I love Riley Leonard, and I Kyle McCord is interesting, and to me, if I'm the 49ers, I definitely draft a day 3 quarterback. I think it's a down year for quarterbacks, but the more I look at the day 3 guys, the more I'm intrigued by picking a day 3 quarterback. What do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things with what you had to say during that whole explanation and question that you teed up. There is nothing wrong with a quarterback needing complementary pieces around him to be successful. Okay. And you just think about all of the quarterbacks over time. Like Joe Montana and Steve Young had loaded teams. Bill Walsh, Jerry Rice, good ground game, good defense. Tom Brady at moments had Randy Moss, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, Bill Belichick, the best defense of that generation. Peyton Manning had Marvin Harrison and Edgerrin James. You think about some of these other quarterbacks over time. Kurt Warner, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk, Dick Vermeil. Modern day, Joe Burrow has had Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Patrick Mahomes early in his career had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill with Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo now. Like, there's nothing wrong with quarterbacks needing pieces around them. And when you look throughout the course of NFL history, quarterbacks have won championships because they have really good teams. Very rarely does a quarterback put the entire team on their shoulders and they win the Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford had Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, Aaron Donald, and Sean McVay. Like, Brock Purdy made it to the Super Bowl with a loaded team. Oftentimes, teams who play in the Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen, are really good teams, okay? And so Brock Purdy should not be knocked for having a really good team. He brought the best out of those players and maximized those players and his coach. And he was a huge reason why the Niners made it to the Super Bowl in 2023, which is why I believe he's capable of doing that once again. As far as the draft question, I'm not as high on Riley Leonard as you are. I just have concerns about him consistently winning from the pocket and having to throw the football. It is tricky because it's a very thin quarterback class. And so quarterbacks who in previous years might be day 3 guys, I think become day 2 guys. I love Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, the Ohio State transfer. He has that gunslinger mentality. I think that down the road, he can end up being one of the top quarterbacks in this class. He threw for 4,800 yards, nearly 40 touchdowns, and he has a strong enough arm to push the ball downfield. I love his aggressiveness. I'm a big fan of Will Howard out of Ohio State. I thought once he found a rhythm, got some confidence, and really mastered that offense late in the year outside of the Michigan game, and then in the college football playoff alongside Chip Kelly. Yes, he had good weapons around him, but he was throwing some dots. And he's big, he's strong, he can make plays with his feet when he needs to. I like the arm strength and the ability to make plays across the field for both him and Kyle McCord. Ideally, they would be day 3 guys. But in this quarterback class, they might be day 2 guys. And so for the Niners, do you take a quarterback in the 3rd round? I think that's a little bit too early. In previous years, a McCord and a Howard might be available. Now you might be realistically looking at a player like Riley Leonard. And do you look at the athleticism and running ability and say, we can work off of that and develop him into a better thrower? Yeah, maybe. A Jaylen Milroe, intriguing player. But again, I think he might go a little bit too early as compared to where he might in previous draft classes. It also all depends on how do the Niners evaluate Tanner Mordecai? What do they think about Mordecai as a player? You have Purdy, you have Mac Jones. If you like Tanner Mordecai, you don't draft a quarterback, I don't think, in wasting a pick there if you think that Mordecai can be your QB3. If the Niners do draft the quarterback, it's probably under the assumption that they're going to be on the 53-man roster, right? They have too many other roster holes and needs for them to waste a pick. And so that's kind of how I think.
Is it possible, Chase, that if they do go after a quarterback, it's just further more leverage against Purdy and paying Purdy? I mean, maybe it's an indication that the Niners' stated position is that we're going to be ruthless in negotiations. And now you got your quarterback and, maybe wanting $65 million. I don't know, but he could. Is it possible that they may, they've got Mack, they've got Tanner Mordecai, that they may draft a Kyle McCord in the 5th round or a Riley Leonard or somebody like that and just play extreme hardball with Brock Purdy to the point of maybe even sacrificing the season to do so? I mean, I don't know their mindset, but the Mac Jones thing clearly was like, hey man, we want to upgrade on our quarterback room from Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs. But how, if they go for Brock Purdy's 25 years old, if they really invest any significant draft capital at all in a quarterback, that might be viewed as just like, we're not giving in and we're going to go to the mattresses on this Purdy negotiation. What do you think? You think they're just going to say, we're getting our price no matter what? Season be damned.
Well, I think your question depends on where the Niners draft that quarterback. If the Niners draft a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round, it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen with these Brock Purdy contract negotiations? If you take a McCord or you take a Will Howard, 2 experienced college players, you sign Mac Jones, is that a sign that there could be choppy waters with these Brock Purdy contract negotiations? I think so. If you take a Riley Leonard in the 6th or 7th round, I don't think that's a telling mark of where these Purdy negotiations are going.
Okay, let's talk about the 11th pick. I haven't talked to you in a couple weeks. I don't know about you. If you're like me, the more I watch these draft prospects, the more my opinions change, right? Every time I watch somebody, there's guys that 2 weeks ago I didn't like as much that I like more today. There's guys that 2 weeks ago I liked a lot more and I like them less now. To me, it's as we get closer to the draft and I start watching more, I typically like the prospects less because there's a failure rate in these guys and you start to see why.
Yeah.
That all being said, how have your last couple weeks gone? Do you have thoughts on what you'd like to see the Niners do at 11? Do you have you heard things? Do you have insights or have you have sources of things that you've heard, whispers that you've heard about what they may or may not do at 11?
Yeah, the NFL draft process is so fascinating because things change so much in our evaluations of these prospects from the college season into bowl season and the college football playoff to in the lead up to the NFL combine to after the NFL combine. And then after that, you're far removed from the previous year where you really start to dive into more of your draft research, prep, and film study, that things change even more, especially in the 2 weeks in the lead up to the draft. And so my opinions on a lot of these players, like you, like others, have changed a lot over the last several months because film study, context, workouts, pro day, combine, all of that, the context really matters. As we get closer to the draft, I think it becomes more realistic that at number 11, Armand Membu, Will Campbell are not there, and the Niners go defensive line with the 11th overall pick, and then they go offensive line in round 2. And I'm fine with that. If at 43, Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota is available, I am rushing that pick to the podium, and I'm making that selection as quickly as possible. I truly believe that he can end up being one of the top offensive tackles in this class, and if you get him at 43 with the really good value there, I'm cool with it. Great size, a lot of experience, very comfortable in space, outside zone blocker. In his pass sets, there's some room to grow and develop there, but the athleticism, the size, the physicality, and the experience, all things that I like. And so if you go Offensive tackle 43, that's okay. You address a massive need. That probably means that you went defensive line with number 11. And so the closer that we get to the draft, the more I think the Niners go either Shamar Stewart at number 11, Jaylen Walker, if he's there, maybe Michael Williams. If Mason Graham falls, I wouldn't be surprised at that, or a Walter Nolan or a Derek Harmon. I think those are the players that the Niners are kind of honing in on, and that's the feeling and the sense that I get as we get closer to the draft, that they don't go offensive tackle with number 11. Instead, they go edge or defensive tackle, and I think that they can pick up a really good player. I also would not be surprised at all if the Niners trade back a little bit. Let's say you trade back from 11 to that 15 to 19 range, and you can still get a Walter Nolan or a Derek Harmon. And then that allows you to move up and get an earlier second round pick, maybe even get to that 30 to 32 range where you can get another player who you really like while still keeping a premium second round pick. And then in the first 45 picks, what if you're able to pick 2 or 3 high-level players who can be starters from the jump or turn into starters very soon and be high-level impact players as a rookie? I don't hate that strategy either. But you asked about number 11. Those grouping of players, I just think that the Niners go that route. What would I do? I love Mike Green out of Marshall. If the character stuff and the personal stuff works out, I think that he could be a tremendous sidekick alongside Nick Bosa. And I think the game translates to the next level. Twitch, bend, speed, explosiveness, instincts, college production, 17 sacks, 23 TFLs. He's really good at collapsing the pocket, getting to the quarterback, being disruptive there, but he's smart and instinctual in a way where he's really good against the run. And I would love to see what Robert Saleh and Chris Kosar can do with a player like that. So Mike Green and probably Jaylen Walker are my top 2 edge rushers that I would love to see go to the Niners at number 11. At defensive tackle, if Mason Graham is there, you pick him. I love Walter Nolan. I like Derek Harmon. I'm not a Shamar Stewart guy like you are. I know that the pressure numbers are there. I know he's an athletic freak. I love how his nickname is the Maniac because he plays like that through the whistle and sometimes past the whistle. I think in a wide 9, he might be a better pro as compared to being a college player. But when I'm taking a player that early, I just simply need to see more production. He didn't finish as far as sacks. He didn't finish as far as missed tackles. And you're a Texas A&M guy, and I've heard you acknowledge that. We've seen so many times these athletic players wow you at the NFL Combine, wow you as far as their body type. But the lack of production ends up being and ringing true at the NFL level. And so for a player that gifted to have 1.5 sacks in each of the last 3 years, I just need to see a little bit more. Would I trust the Niners player development program and their coaching to bring the best out of a player like that? For sure. But I'd rather have a more proven player like a Mike Green or a Jaylen Walker. And for people to say, Mike Green, small school guy, no way. He originally went to Virginia.
Marshall. Well, no,
he originally went to Virginia, and then he went to Marshall. And if you turn on the tape against Ohio State, he had a great game against Ohio State. And that's an offensive line where 3 or 4 of those players are going to get drafted this year, and 3 of them are going to go high. And so those are kind of my thoughts with the 11th pick, and then kind of the strategy looking to round 2 as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't view, first of all, quality competition is always a big deal, but I think David Walker's tremendous, and yet he played at Central Arkansas. So, it's, Charles Haley went to the Hall of Fame. He played at James Madison. Yeah. Great players come from, all walks of life and all areas. It's not always
Randy Moss went to Marshall.
Right. And then not only that, there's here, my only thing on Mike Green, I love Mike Green. I think Mike Green is an awesome player, but I don't think he's a first and second down, 4-3, hand in the dirt, stand up against a 325-pound offensive tackle. I think you could wash him out pretty easily. And your run defense, he's going to have a hard time setting the edge against in the NFL as a 4-3, hand in the dirt defensive end.
Yeah, he's more of a stand-up guy. But Bosa's done that from time to time. Leonard Floyd did that last year. D Ford sometimes did that. So Yeah, I
Mike,
hear you there, though.
Matt Barrows also kind of had this note. He said that he doesn't think the Niners will take Mike Green or James Pierce at 11 due to character concerns.
That makes sense.
I haven't done the due diligence on, I don't have that information. I don't really want that information. If I stumble across it, I don't mind. But, I don't know.
For Mike Green, there were 2 sexual assault allegations, one in high school, one at Virginia. That was the reason why he was suspended by Virginia in 2022, never found guilty of either. And then people in Dane Brugler's draft guide, he had noted that like the coaching staffs at Virginia and Marshall have nothing but good things to say about him. But obviously that's a huge red flag, something like that. And that could keep a team from taking him at number 11. And I wouldn't blame them at all. I wouldn't blame that at all. I just really like the player. And I think like Mike Green has that type of Von Miller game that I think translates very well to the next level.
Super explosive, all kinds of moves. I mean, the spin move. He's got like 5 different moves. He's got moves on top of moves. He can set you up with all kinds of moves.
And that's why I don't love Shamar Stewart. He lacks some of those moves.
He has no moves.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a bull
literally
rush.
has no moves.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Tony Pauline says the Niners are choosing between Shamar Stewart and Walter Nolan at 11. And if that were the case, I think I would go with Walter Nolan, and I would try to trade back in either case to get more picks, because I think the real sweet spot in this draft is 3, 4, 5. If you can pile up some picks in 3, 4, and 5, I think you're going to be really, really happy. What do you think of Nolan as far as what's the downside of Nolan? Some people say he doesn't love football, but his numbers against the run and the pass are good. He was, 5-star in high school. He played well at A&M. I transferred to Ole Miss. I mean, they didn't make the playoff, but I mean, it wasn't because of him. I thought he was a pretty dominating player. I see Chris Jones. I see a guy who can play all over the line, maybe even defensive end. I think Walter Nolan would be my pick. If it came down to Shamar Stewart or Walter Nolan, I'd take Walter Nolan.
I'm going Walter Nolan every single day and again on Sunday.
Yeah.
And this is a player who is around 300 pounds. He's very explosive. He's very twitchy for that size at defensive tackle. I don't see the lack of love for football at all. In fact, I see a player who has a great motor, who plays every single play out until the whistle is blown, and sometimes has aggressiveness after the whistle. And frankly, I think the Niners need a little bit of that chippiness, that swagger. You lose that with Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. You have it with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. You have it with Diamador Lenore. You have that type of personality at defensive coordinator with Robert Saleh. You need that in a player like Walter Nolan. Now, Shamar Stewart has that too. That's why they call him the maniac. But you have the production with Walter Nolan. And I know at Texas A&M, it didn't work out well for him. But think about all the Texas A&M players who might go in round 1, round 2, who didn't have good production, right? Shamar Stewart, the aforementioned player, Nick Scorton, Walter Nolan, and so Shamar Turner is another one. The scheme usage is something that people note too for why these players were kind of capped and they didn't fulfill their potential. And while it didn't work out for Nolan at Texas A&M, he goes to Ole Miss. He was a big NIL signing by them. Everybody loved him within that program, and he's good as a pass rusher, very disruptive there. But you noted it too. He's really good against the run. And I'm tired of seeing these Niners defensive tackles who can't stop the run. They can rush the passer, but Walter Nolan can do that, and he can be a run stuffer. And so I know he's slid down and is farther down on a lot of teams' draft boards. But when you have a player who was the number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school, who has had sustained production in college, who is 300 pounds, who is fast, twitch, get off, explosive, who's a dual threat player as far as pressuring the quarterback, collapsing the pocket right from the interior, and then you can stop the run as well. I just think that player can be really good for a long time. It's a massive position of need for San Francisco. And I've really developed an infatuation with Walter Nolan in the pre-draft process where, yeah, I'm fine with taking him at number 11. And shoot, if the draft board falls your way, depending on how many quarterbacks go inside the top 10, causing other players to drop, and you trade back a little bit to take Nolan, and then you get another pick, even better right there.
There's a guy that you got to check out. That I didn't watch this guy because I don't watch a lot of Tulane football. But they have a defensive lineman named Aiden Huntington. Are you familiar with this guy?
Not too familiar, no.
Okay, so he went from Kent State to Louisiana Monroe to Tulane. He's 6'1", 270, 275, but he's an edge rusher. And he met recently with the Niners and the Cowboys. And, he's definitely Tulane's most explosive athlete. The scouting report, the guy had 15 and a half career sacks. He's considered to be really twitchy off the edge. But he definitely is like thick and short and, but explosively powerful. What do you view as, okay, so if D tackle is the play in the first round, what do you want to see on day 2? Tony Pauline says that Dorian Strong, a corner from Vatech, is on their list, and that Oladejo, the defensive end from UCLA, are on their list on day 2. Would you be happy with if they go D tackle in round 1? Do they have to go offensive line in round 2 or in round 3, or round 2 or 3, or do you play best player available? Do you want that corner? Do you want the edge? How do you view, if defensive tackle is the primary, what's the secondary?
I would say edge or offensive tackle. And so the first 2 days of the draft, that's rounds 1 through 3. And I think that some semblance of picks in the first 3 rounds, you have to come away with a defensive tackle, an edge rusher, an offensive tackle, and probably a corner. Like, those are the biggest needs for me by far on this Niners team. You can figure center and left guard out in the mid to late rounds. You can figure linebacker out in the later rounds with a player like Teddy Buchanan. But defensive tackle, edge, right tackle, and cornerback, I think by far are like the biggest needs on this team. And then there's a pretty steep drop to everything else. This is a deep tight end class. This is a deep running back class. This is a deep defensive tackle class. And I think that you can find quality players, especially with the Niners track record at linebacker and along the interior offensive line in the mid to late rounds. And so that's kind of how I approach rounds 1 through 3. The Niners are at 11, 43, 75, and 100. And so even a player like Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky is a good slot corner if you want to keep Diamador Lenore on the outside, who you can probably get around pick 100. A lot of people thought that Renardo Green was a reach, including myself early on. I had him going in the 3rd or 4th round. Niners got him in the 2nd. And so that's kind of the strategy that I'm thinking of for rounds 1 through 3.
We both stream with Grant, and yet, we don't always agree. That's just the way it is. We all have different thoughts, and that's great.
Diversity of opinions is a good thing, people.
Exactly. And Grant's a better guy than people think, by the way. But
he is.
Grant has tweeted out 49ers should trade Brock Purdy if he wants more than $50 million per year. What would you say? If we were doing a stream right now and Grant just jumped in with this line, the Niners should trade Brock Purdy if he wants more than $50 million per year. There are people in the Niner fan base that absolutely agree with this. And then I would say there are more that don't. But where are you on the I don't want to say ridiculous because it's not ridiculous, but the dramatic move of, hey, the Purdy negotiations aren't going well. Let's pull the ripcord and trade this guy. Do you agree?
Yeah, I disagree. And I think that the going rate for a top 10 quarterback, and if you disagree that Purdy's top 10, he's borderline top 10, he's 10 to 13, is $50+ million per year, especially for a player who's played under $1 million every single season that he's been in the NFL. And so from Purdy's standpoint, he's trying to make up for what he's lost and has not gotten as far as his contract. And again, let me point to that Jalen Hurts scenario, right? Is Jalen Hurts an elite thrower of the football? No. Now, is he special in the way where he's a dual threat guy? He's very strong. He has the clutch gene and has played his best football in the biggest of games? For sure. In 2 Super Bowls against Steve Spagnuolo, he's put up nearly 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, and he's outplayed Patrick Mahomes in both of those games. But the Jalen Hurts contract, he's making $51 million per year. And think about all the players that the Eagles are paying. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, soon to be Cam Jurgens, Saquon Barkley. Dallas Goedert has been a top 5 highest paid tight end. You can pay a quarterback $50+ million and still pay other players and build up your football team. Under this condition, you have to hit on your draft picks as well to help build up depth and fill in your starting lineup. The Eagles have been able to do that. The Niners have had far too many misses. And so Purdy, throughout much of his tenure as a starting quarterback, has put up top 10 numbers. He's been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL. There's nothing wrong with him needing talent around him to succeed. Some of the great quarterbacks throughout NFL history have also needed complementary playmakers and good coaching around them to win big games and win Super Bowls. It's almost as if when you win the Super Bowl, your team's great. And so Purdy has played at a level where he's demand $50+ million. He's also been the best bargain in the NFL. His first 3 years in the NFL, I would not trade him away, because what's the alternative? If you're in quarterback purgatory, you're effed. You're screwed in the National Football League. And Purdy gives you a chance to win week in, week out, and he's proven that you can win big with him.
Do you have a player on day 3 you're fired up about?
Day 3
at any position, really. Just just a day 3 prospect that you've stumbled on that you're like, hey, you know what, man, I really like that guy.
Yeah, I love the William and Mary offensive tackle Charles Grant. I think is going to be an excellent player. He could go day 2, but he's kind of that borderline day 2, day 3 guy. Braden Swinson, the defensive lineman out of LSU, is an excellent player who I think is going to be really good. I like Teddy Buchanan, the linebacker out of Cal. Love the athleticism that he brings to the table. And this running back class is so deep, where I know Kyle Shanahan might not be able to help himself. He might have to take a running back in round 3 again. But if you wait until day 3, I think that you can get some excellent day 3 running backs. And Ollie Gordon, a Damian Martinez, does a Caleb Johnson fall? Does a Cam Scattaboo, because he ran a little bit slow at his pro day, does he fall a little bit to round 4? But those are some of the players who I think could be some really good late day 2, day 3 targets. Jake Majors, the Texas center. I think that he could be a 7th round guy that would be a good scheme fit for Kyle Shanahan and good competition to Jake Brendel. And those are some of the players, that I'm kind of thinking of just off the dome, that I don't have a list in front of me because I'm not at my usual place of recording.
No problem. Baldy says that Darius Alexander.
That's another Toledo. One, the Toledo defensive tackle. He's 24, but I like him. Yeah.
Yeah, he says he's a strong fit for the Niners.
Yeah.
Is there a player that you're like, oh my God, steer clear? Just do not touch this player with a 10-foot pole. I just don't feel good. I don't believe in him. I don't like him. I'm much more in the category of players that I like than players that I don't like, because I just don't have a lot of time to look for, to spend looking at players I don't like necessarily. But I'm not a huge fan of Kelvin Banks, who I know was the Outland Trophy winner, and he won the Lombardi Award. And I mean, to me, I like Membu, but then after Membu, I'm with you. I'd rather wait on the tackle and go with an Arianti Ursary. Yep. Anthony Belton played from an outside zone system. He's a house. From NC State. To me, Ursary or Belton in round 3 is a better play than some Kelvin Banks pick at 11.
Yeah. You know who I also like too, just thinking about it? Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia. He's a really good player. The player that I want to stay away from is Shamar Stewart, for the reasons that I mentioned. I get that he's a freak athlete. And I get that the athletic testing was incredible. Ran so well in the 40-yard dash. I know the pressure numbers are good. But if you're that athletic and you're that freakish, why only 1.5 sacks each of the last 3 years on nearly 700 pass rush snaps? And why do you miss so many tackles? That to me is just a no-go. And I like Kelvin Banks. I'm not sure if he's a tackle or a guard. I think that he can be a tackle. My issue with Banks, for his size, he's on the ground way too much. And so I'd almost rather, instead of taking a player like Banks at 11, that's when you go Ursery in the 2nd round, Charles Grant in the 3rd round, Anthony Belton in the 3rd or 4th round. I'd rather do that because I like the value there and the potential upside. Whereas if you go Banks at 11, you miss out potentially on a really good edge or a really good defensive tackle.
My thing is that, the one thing through the years, when I go back and look at my notes of guys who have missed or I missed on, it's usually a player who was highly rated out of high school, who everybody had some preconceived notion that he was going to be great. And he plays for a huge dominant Power 5 program and then looks okay, but not great. And then just based on kind of the measurables and the rankings, he kind of gets graduated through, and all of a sudden it's like, this guy's special. And it's like every guy from Bama is not special. Every guy from LSU is not special. Every guy from Georgia is not special. And I just feel like every guy from Ohio State's not special. To me, there's 2 guys in this draft that I think are being elevated by their surroundings and by their program. And that's Jack Sawyer from, and I know you like Jack Sawyer initially, but the more I watch Jack Sawyer, I just see a guy who's very, very stiff. He just is very stiff at 260. I love the motor, and he was good for the Buckeyes. But if I got to go with one of the 2 guys, to me, the production of JT Tuimoloau in the playoffs and the bigger body, I like Tuimoloau more than I like Sawyer. So I think Sawyer's a little bit overinflated, and I think Mikael Williams, who was a 5-star, was going to SC, and then Clay Helton said, no, Clay Helton got fired. Then he said, no, I'm not going to SC. He's from Columbus, Georgia. He went to Georgia, and he played all right at times, but he looks awesome. And I think people look at him and say, oh yeah, look at this guy, 6'5", 260. He's super ripped. But he ran 4.77, and he didn't have tons and tons of production. And to me, when I watch Georgia, and I watch them weekly because I really love watching them, to me, I noticed Jalen Walker a ton. I noticed Malachi Starks a ton. I didn't notice Mikael Williams hardly ever. So that would be the one guy. Mikael Williams in round 1, Jack Sawyer in round 2. I think Mikael Williams is a 2nd-round pick, and I think Sawyer's more of a day 3 pick. And I think they're being, elevated based on their surroundings and their programs. And by the way, Mikael Williams, I think a lot of people saying, the Niners are going to take him at 11. I'm pretty sure the Niners aren't going to take him at 11. Why? He was going to the draft, and yesterday he said, I'm not going to the draft. And to me, if you're going 11th, you're going to the draft. The only reason you're not going to go to the draft is if your agent says, you know what, you may go in the mid-20s, and you don't want to sit there for hours on camera. Or in the green room waiting. So I think Jackson Dart and Mikael Williams yesterday both said they're not going to the draft, and Hairston, the Kentucky corner, said that he is. And I think they all said it for the same reasons. I think Hairston's going to go, 20 to 25, and he's going in round 1, so he wants to be there. And I think Dart and Mikael Williams may have gotten indications that they're going late in round 1, or maybe not in round 1, and they don't want to go. What do you think?
Yes, some of these corners, by the way, you mentioned Maxwell Hairston, they can fly, man. Yeah. I mean, Jade Barron can fly, Maxwell Hairston can fly, Trey Amos can fly. There are a lot of corners in this class. Jacob Parrish, I love his mentality with how he plays out of Kansas State. Like, he's a 4-3, 4-4 guy. That's why I'm kind of worried about Will Johnson to the Niners at number 11. I get the big time playmaking ability. The ball skills are there. Oftentimes when he intercepts passes, they go back for pick sixes, but he plays his best off ball when he can see the field in front of him, but lacks recovery speed. He's been dealing with lower body injuries. And I was listening to Ryan Russillo with Todd McShay and Daniel Jeremiah. They were just doing some NFL draft talk, and it brought me back to the golden era of ESPN when the network was actually good and had great talent. And they were taught. It's a shame what's happened to them. And they were talking about how they're hearing like some chatter that Will Johnson's been running in the 4.6s, 40-yard dashes by himself. And so that really worries me with a player like that. But yeah,
I never again, after Trey Lance, I never again will ever be satisfied with miles per hour.
Yeah,
you can't. You're not. I don't care if you tell me you run 750 miles per hour. I don't care. I want to see the 40 time. And here's the bottom line: guys who can jump do. Guys who can run do. Guys who can lift do. If a guy skips a particular test, it's because he can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and Johnson hasn't done anything in the pre-draft. And so I'd almost rather go Jahdae Barron if the Niners go corner at number 11 than Will Johnson. And the other thing with Barron, he's the best zone corner in this draft. Well, since Kyle Shanahan became head coach, the Niners have the number 1 zone rate on defense. And so he's a good athlete. Texas asked him to do a lot. He played all over the field. He was a really good leader for that team. And he's a good scheme fit. And that kind of allows you to put Diamador Lenore on the inside where he's very good on the outside. He's elite as a nickel corner. And so if you have Barron, Lenore, Renardo Green, that is an excellent young cornerback trio. I know we got kind of off track a little bit, but those are just some draft thoughts that I was thinking about as you were kind of going. What was the original question? This is the thing with the draft and prospects. We just kind of nerd out.
Yeah, we're all over the place. I'm all over the place on the prospects.
Because you're right. I do like Sawyer a little bit more than you. I know he's not twitchy. He doesn't have great bend, but he has really strong hands. I love the motor. I like the overall strength. I like the production. I like the availability. I like the focus and the work ethic. You know, a lot of people knocked a Trent Cole or a Max Crosby in the pre-draft for those same reasons. I think both of them were 5th-round picks. Obviously Crosby more recent than Trent Cole, but I look at Jack Sawyer as a very similar player to that.
I share the screen on this one. One more on the kind of an interesting note. I don't know if it's accurate or not. According to 49ers and NFL News 24/7, the 49ers had several scouts in Georgia today per sources. Jaylen Walker and Mikael Williams gave teams a last chance to see them on the field before the draft next week. They did individual drills and met with several team scouts. Who do you think, if both these guys are there at 11, who do you want?
Jaylen Walker, Jaylen Walker, Jaylen Walker, Jaylen Walker. I think his ability as a player who can help your pass rush and a player who can help you as an off-ball linebacker is really incredible. The athleticism, the body type is certainly there. I know you and I have talked about how he comes from being a coach's son, great leader within that Georgia program. The production was there. Mikael Williams, there was a lack of production. A lot of people say that was due to him having to deal with an ankle injury all throughout this past year. He is twitchy. He is a really good athlete, but I just think Jaylen Walker is the better player. And I just like how you can use him in a couple of different ways, whereas I think Williams is more so one-dimensional.
I love Jaylen Walker.
And one of my favorite players in this draft.
Yeah, a lot of people feel like he's going to bust. He's going to be a bust. Hey, covering the Eagles, have you ever had a chance to actually interview Howie?
Yeah, I've talked to Howie a few times.
What do you think their connection? I know Lynch is buddies with Kirby, so the Niners have a Georgia connection, but the Eagles have done the Georgia thing to death.
Yeah.
Are you projecting a Georgia player to who are you projecting to the Eagles at the end of the first round? Or is it, I've seen James Pierce. I've seen, some really great prospects make it down to them. What do you think the Eagles do at the end of the first round? And what is their connection to Georgia? Why is it that they're so Georgia such big fans of that program, you think?
There was a turning point, and it was when the Eagles took Jaylen Rager out of TCU and passed up on Justin Jefferson. Howie was like, I got to stop being the smartest guy in the room, and we just have to go with the best players from the best programs who play against the most elite competition. And so right after the Eagles drafted Jaylen Rager, what did they do? Drafted Devontae Smith, and then it really started their run on Georgia players, because I think Howie looked at Georgia as the best team, the best program, the most success, with the best athletes and the best football players going up against the best competition in college football. And it's worked out wonderfully. And instead of trying to find that gem after how we missed on Jaylen Rager, missed on Marcus Smith, part of the front office that drafted Danny Watkins as an offensive lineman, they just said, we're done with this. We're going to tap into the best pipelines of college football and take the best players, because the chances are they're going to be impactful players at the NFL level. And so that was kind of the switch of their philosophy, in my opinion. And what they've done is certainly back that up. At 32, I think they could go in a couple of different ways. If Walter Nolan falls, he is such an Eagle. If James Pierce falls, I think he's an Eagle. Nick Scorton is another name to watch. If Malachi Starks or Nick Emanwuri go to 32, I think they are both players to look out for. If Gray Zabel is there, Howie's obsessed with building the trenches, and I wish John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan had more of that attitude along the offensive line.
Good stuff, man. Were you there when the Eagles are not there, but were you watching the draft or were you covering the Eagles when the Eagles had that argument between Tom Donahoe and another guy in the war room? Basically,
that was for Milton Williams, by the way.
Yeah, but do you remember who Donahoe wanted? Because it was Donahoe wanted somebody that wasn't Milton Williams, and Howie wanted Milton. They drafted Milton. Howie's high-fiving all these guys. He gets to the white-haired Donahoe, and Donahoe was like, had arms crossed, and he gave him the, like this. And I remember saying at the time, Howie's right, Donahoe's wrong. Milton's better than this guy. And I forget who the hell that guy was.
Yeah.
But Donahoe wanted another D tackle, and they went Milton Williams, who was like a pass rusher, great athlete from La Tech. And the guy that he wanted was maybe a little bit more productive, but not nearly as athletic as Milton. And I mean, heck, Milton was the top free agent signing of New England. So he, and obviously won a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl with Milton. You don't remember who that was? I don't remember who it was, but Donahoe wanted the other guy, whoever the other guy was.
I think Donahoe wanted a corner. And the Eagles instead went Milton Williams, defensive tackle. And I think what happened was the Giants traded up 5 spots to go ahead of them. I'm kind of trying to look at an article right now to see who exactly it was. UCF's Aaron Robinson came off the board. And I think that's the player that Donahoe wanted. Or it may have been Aleem McNeil, who is also
that's it. That's
player.
it.
Yeah, Aleem McNeil.
Who's good? Who's good?
Yeah,
but Milton Williams
and he got paid, and Milton Williams got paid. So I guess both were right. But Milton Williams obviously helped the Eagles win the Super Bowl. But that was a legendary clip, and that's what can happen in war rooms.
Oh, it's awesome! It was great.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a lot of Type A personalities, man. There's a lot of strong opinions. Yeah. All right, that's gonna do it for us. Chase, always appreciate you, bro, and have a great weekend. What do you got planned for draft week? I mean, anything different on Chat Sports during draft week? I know during the draft you guys do a bunch of stuff, but how about the week of starting Monday?
Yeah. So, for the draft, I'll be live every day, every round, talking about every pick for the Niners, deep dives on every pick, and then grades at the end of kind of each day of the draft. And then in the week, obviously leading up to it, which starts on Monday, just a bunch of draft content. I'll drop my final mock on Wednesday, and then maybe some draft rumors on Thursday before the draft. So looking forward to it. I know you'll crush as well.
Oh man, we always do. Kev and I will go live after every pick, and I'll do some stuff on Thursday night on KMBR. Looking forward to a great draft and bringing you guys as much content as we possibly can And that's our commitment to you guys. Anyway, Chase, have a great day. Thanks to Pig in a Pickle, the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Claude Daddy Arcade, Sharp Corners. All the links are in the description below. For Chase, I'm Larry. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.